It was a case that had left a community in shock, a family grieving, and a nation searching for answers. On a quiet summer night, 34 years ago, Anna Kane went missing, leaving behind only a mystery that seemed impossible to solve. But after all these years, the case has finally been cracked, and justice has been served. This is the story of Anna Kane, and how her case was finally solved after all these years. Hello and welcome to Dark Secrets, your channel dedicated to exploring some of the most fascinating and haunting crimes in American history. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out. It was the summer of 1988, and the small town of Millfield was buzzing with excitement. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and everything seemed perfect. But in the middle of all this beauty, a tragedy was about to unfold. On the night of June 23, 1988, Anna Kane, a 23-year-old college student, left her apartment to run some errands. She never returned. The following morning, when her friends and family realized she was missing, they reported it to the police. An extensive search was launched, but there was no trace of Anna. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The crime took place in Millfield, a quaint town nestled in the rolling hills of rural Indiana. It was a close-knit community, where everyone knew everyone, and the disappearance of Anna sent shockwaves through the town. It was a crime that would change the town forever and launch an investigation that would last for decades. The initial investigation was intense and thorough. The police worked around the clock, leaving no stone unturned in their search for Anna. They interviewed friends, family, and witnesses, and combed through her apartment and the surrounding area for any clues. A massive search effort was launched, with volunteers from the community joining the police in the hunt for Anna. They searched the countryside, parks, and lakes, but still, there was no sign of her. As the days went by, the investigation started to hit dead ends. The leads dried up, and the trail grew colder by the day. It seemed as if the case would never be solved, and the family of Anna Kane was left with nothing but unanswered questions and heartbreak. But the police never gave up. They continued to work on the case, determined to find the truth, no matter how long it took. As the years passed, the case of Anna Kane seemed to grow colder by the day. The initial burst of activity had died down, and the investigation appeared to be at a standstill. The police had exhausted all leads and had no new information to work with. It was a complex case that defied explanation. Anna had no known enemies, and there was no evidence of foul play. The lack of concrete evidence, combined with the passage of time, made the case more difficult to solve with each passing year. The case of Anna Kane was considered a cold case, a mystery that had gone unsolved for far too long. The family of Anna had lost hope of ever finding out what had happened to their loved one, and the town of Millfield had come to accept that the case may never be solved. It was a beautiful spring day in 2022 when the police received a phone call that would change everything. A person who wished to remain anonymous claimed to have information about the disappearance of Anna Kane. This call set off a chain of events that would lead to the long-awaited breakthrough in the case. The police immediately followed up on the lead, and to their surprise, the information provided was solid. It was a piece of evidence that had been overlooked in the initial investigation, but with new advances in technology, they were able to re-examine it and draw a crucial connection. The new evidence was a small, seemingly insignificant piece of cloth that had been found near the scene of the crime all those years ago. It had been stored in a police evidence locker, forgotten and overlooked. But with the latest DNA analysis techniques, they were finally able to extract a DNA sample from the cloth. This DNA sample led the police to a suspect, a man who had been living in the town of Millfield all these years. The police confronted him with the new evidence, and after a lengthy interview, the man finally broke down and confessed to the crime. The new evidence was the key that had unlocked the mystery of Anna Kane's disappearance. The case that had seemed unsolvable for so long was finally solved, and the family of Anna Kane was finally able to find the closure they had been seeking for so long. The suspect in the Anna Kane case was a man named John Doe, a seemingly ordinary man who had been living in the town of Millfield for many years. He had a quiet life, and there was no indication that he was capable of such a heinous crime. John had a clean criminal record and had never been a suspect in any previous crimes. He lived a quiet life, keeping to himself and avoiding any unnecessary attention. He worked as a handyman, and his clients all spoke highly of him, saying that he was a hard worker and a good man. But beneath the surface, there was a dark side to John. The evidence gathered during the investigation painted a picture of a man with a troubled past, a man who had struggled with his inner demons for years. The new evidence was a critical piece of the puzzle, and it allowed the police to make a direct link between the suspect and the crime. With the DNA sample from the cloth, they were able to build a strong case against the suspect, and it was only a matter of time before they made the arrest. The police worked tirelessly to gather additional evidence, interviewing witnesses and re-examining the scene of the crime. They pieced together a compelling narrative that left no room for doubt, and they were finally able to bring the suspect in for questioning. The interview was intense, and the suspect was confronted with the overwhelming evidence against him. He was faced with the facts, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. After a lengthy interview, the man finally broke down and confessed to the crime. With the confession, the police had the evidence they needed to make the arrest. The man was taken into custody, and the news of the arrest quickly spread throughout the town of Millfield. The family of Anna Kane was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that justice would be served. The motive behind the crime was one of the biggest mysteries of the case. For years, the police had struggled to find a clear reason for why John Doe would have committed such a heinous act. But as the investigation progressed, a motive began to emerge. It was discovered that John had a troubled relationship with his own family and had struggled with feelings of anger and resentment for much of his life. He had a history of confrontations with others and was known to have a short fuse. Furthermore, evidence showed that John had been stalking Anna Kane for some time before her disappearance. He had become fixated on her, and his obsession had grown into a dangerous desire to control and possess her. When she rejected his advances, he snapped and committed the terrible crime. The motive behind the crime was a mixture of anger, obsession, and a desire for control. It was a chilling reminder of the dangers of stalking and how quickly it can escalate into something far more sinister. The trial of John Doe was a highly publicized event, and the entire town of Millfield was eagerly awaiting the outcome. The trial lasted for several weeks, with both the prosecution and the defense presenting their cases. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including DNA samples, witness testimony, and John's confession. They painted a clear picture of a man who had become obsessed with Anna Kane and had committed a terrible crime in the heat of the moment. The defense, on the other hand, argued that John had been unfairly targeted by the police and that the evidence against him was circumstantial. They pointed to the fact that there were no eyewitnesses to the crime and that the confession had been obtained through coercion. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury was convinced by the evidence presented by the prosecution, and after several days of deliberation, they returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. John Doe was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a close to the 34-year-old case of Anna Kane. The verdict was met with cheers from the family of Anna Kane and the people of Millfield, who had been seeking justice for so many years. They felt a sense of closure, knowing that the person responsible for the crime had finally been held accountable.